every moment, every beat is mapped out. Talking about a month-long process just for that 15 seconds.
Stranger Things is easily one of the most terrifying shows on Netflix. We've seen Demogorgons, Mind Flayers, and now we've got Vecna lurking around waiting for our Kate Bush CD to skip. Have you ever wondered what the show would look like without the visual effects bringing these creatures to life? Let's get into it.
Okay. Special effects.
Number 1. The Duffer Brothers only knew a few things for certain about the Demogorgon. They wanted him to come from another dimension and have a human body type. The body type was really important to them because they wanted to be able to put an actual person inside the costume for season 1 shooting purposes.
Very quickly we realized, okay, so practical isn't always going to work.
In season 4, however, they brought in animation.
The first animation pass, that's when you're seeing what looks almost like just a gray clay rendering.
The first pass is really important because that's when they can hammer out the details, like how long they want him to roar, for example. After that, they get to the rendering stage. That's where the fun really starts. Everything they've shot, all the animation and real-life stunts get to coexist together.
It's really exciting when those shots finally come together and all the elements.
Number 2. The Demogorgon is one thing, but the actual fight scenes require a different approach. A good portion of time, the Demogorgon is just a guy in a green suit.
Sometimes he would have a tennis ball at the top of his head to show us how tall the Demogorgon was.
In the scene where Hopper has his major showdown with the Demogorgon, the Duffer Brothers really wanted to try and do that entire scene in one shot. But unfortunately, because of how dangerous the stunts were, they were not able to do that.
We didn't want to be using CG people on top of a CG, so we weren't able to do it all in one shot.
They wanted to protect their stunt team, so they did 3 big stunt sequences and stitched them all together. Would you have been able to tell?
The Americans are very tricky.
Number 3. It takes a lot of work, an entire team of people in fact, to make Vecna look as horrifying as he did. The actor, Jamie Campbell Bower, went through an egregious 8.5-hour prosthetic application every time he had to play Vecna. One thing they couldn't do with prosthetics though, was remove his nose.
On each application day, we had a black nose on Jamie with some little white marking dots, so VFX could remove that in post.
VFX also added in those creepy, slithering vines coming out of Vecna's back.
Time for you to join me.
Number 4. Speaking of Vecna, his 8.5-hour prosthetic seems to pay off, because the cast was typically very frightened whenever they'd shoot a scene with him.
Vecna was pretty much fully practical effects. Made it easier for me so I'm not like staring at a man in a green suit.
Sadie Sink also spent a great deal of her time in a harness, rehearsing for her levitation scene, right before her big showdown in the Upside Down.
There's not a lot that you have to do because it's genuinely just so scary.
Number 5. One thing you might not know about Steve's journey to Watergate was that it wasn't even shot in a real lake. It was shot in a convention center in Atlanta, Georgia. Joe Keery recounts diving into a 40-foot tank specifically built for this scene.
Getting to do that sort of stuff is like true movie magic.
Number 6. The insane shootout that destroyed every inch of the Byers home was also shot in one take. Sean Levy, the director of episode 4, was compelled to do it all in one shot. He said it was the most challenging and most rewarding scene he's ever directed.
The whole challenge with the oneer is it requires perfect synchronicity.
Considering they only had one choreography session for this scene, it's fair to say they killed it. Everybody needed to do their job at a high level of near perfection.
It's a doozy.
Number 7. You know that part when Vecna's victims are getting every bone in their body snapped like a wishbone on Thanksgiving? Of course, how could you forget? It's quite difficult to watch, but surprisingly not that difficult to achieve with special effects. To break the fingers, it's essentially working with different layers of a moving hand within Adobe After Effects. For the legs, they utilize a much more practical approach. They need to put their arms through the pants so they can function as legs. And with the bigger range of motion of an arm, we can now create a twisting, breaking movement.
Who's Vecna?
An undead creature of great power.
Number 8. The unique thing about Stranger Things is how they blend practical effects, like makeup and prosthetics, with VFX. In every scene with VFX, they also heavily rely on the makeup team. As we stated earlier, Jamie Campbell Bower worked very closely with the makeup team. So close that he had his own team of people applying lube onto his entire body.
Our last 10-15 minutes would be the four of us literally getting this product all over him to make him look really, really glossy.
Number 9. We're all familiar with Eleven's iconic nosebleed, but have you ever wondered how they get the blood to flow at the right time? At first, corn syrup, a lot of it. The only time Millie would get to call action on set was when she felt it dripping from her nose.
You know, my nose is running with blood, so I'm like, okay, are we ready? It's coming. 3, 2,
Because that didn't always go according to plan, they ended up using CGI blood for those scenes in later seasons.
It's fun to film, but also really stressful.
Number 10. The character of Victor had a brutal disfiguring after his encounter with Vecna. In reality, we can thank the brilliant prosthetic work of Barry Gower for Victor's disturbing look.
The sculpture of Victor Creel's appliance, which you can see the difference in tone, where the appliance finishes just prior to Robert's hairline.
The 2-hour process was so bad for the team because they were able to reference actual scars as opposed to something that is completely fictional.
I suppose all evil must have a home.
Number 11.
11 is me. Like, 11 is just who I am now.
It doesn't take very long for the cast to transform into their characters, but Millie's transformation into 11 is a little more involved.
It takes about an hour to do my old wig. My makeup isn't that crazy at all.
So, judging by this math, you could create at least 8 11s in the time it takes to create one Vecna. Jamie Campbell Bower, we do not envy you underneath all that molding clay. Number 12. In Stranger Things, the Upside Down is just as important as any other character in the show. So how exactly do they create it? A recurring theme we've seen with the Duffer Brothers is that they prefer to do things as practical as they can.
We realized that, in fact, the vision that the brothers had was more extensive than one can always do practically.
When it comes to creating all of the Upside Down creatures, they had to call on a team of CGI experts.
It starts usually with a sculpture, so we digitally sculpt things.
So with a mixture of practical components and a hardworking visual effects team, they were able to create this stunning world just beneath our own. So now you've seen it all. The blend of real-life animation, mounds of prosthetics, and the iconic man in the green suit. The visual effects team clearly works overtime in Hawkins. Knowing all these secrets, do you think you'd be brave enough to face Vecna? Let us know in the comments.